Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you so very much for being here today. We're thrilled to have you with us. And wherever you're joining in from, we're grateful that you're here. I'm not sure if it's morning, afternoon, evening, but we just thank you for being here. So we have a wonderful guest that has joined us today, all the way from the UK. So Beth Stallwood is here today. Beth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Vicki. I'm really pleased to be here with you.
Well, we're thrilled to have you and excited to jump into your story and learn a little bit more about you. But let me give the audience just a little bit of context as to why we've invited you to the show. So Beth has spent 20 years developing her signature, practical, passionate approach, and she excels at getting to the heart of what's actually going on. She's a coach, she's an author, which we're going to talk more about today. She's a speaker, and she's the founder of Create Work Joy. And so Beth has a range of clients globally, from tech scale-ups, sports governing bodies, charities, and higher education institutions. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about you, because our audience doesn't want to hear me talking so much as they want to hear your story. So we're going to jump in, Beth, and just maybe give us, sort of that, summarized version of who you actually are and what's led you to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Vicki. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this session. I hope that you get something out of it. So as Vicki says, I'm Beth. I do a lot of different jobs because I think variety is the spice of life. I am on a mission to make work a more joyful experience for us. As human beings, we on average spend about a third of our entire lives working. It's a big proportion.
Yeah.
And whether that's in an office, whether that's remotely, whether that's hybrid, whether that's working for ourselves or working for a big corporate or a small family business, work is a fundamental part of what we do. And it can be the source of lots of great things, actually. When we think about work, a sense of achievement, of purpose, of learning, of growth, of all of these wonderful things that we have. But it can also be the source of lots of misery and upset and challenges and difficult times and frustration and boredom and all of these other things that we don't like so much. And I've spent the last 20 years of my career working in things like learning and development and organizational culture and growth. I worked in organizations for about 15 years. I worked in the public sector and in sport, and I worked in financial services, and I worked in retail. And the same problems, what I found, cropped up in every organization. Because here's the interesting thing. People are people wherever you go. Humans are humans. And we often think that, organizations are really different in their different kind of industries, but they're actually not. Organizations are groups of people trying to get stuff done. They're trying to achieve things. And I've spent the last 7 years working with organizations and working with individuals as a coach, helping them to grow, to learn, to have better culture. I often call it, on my consulting side of the business, just doing people stuff better, because the idea that we need to remember that the people in our organizations are human is something that some people and some organizations find quite difficult. But actually, it's so true, isn't it? But what we need to think about, I think, and I think this is where maybe your listeners will get something from this, is actually, as individuals, we're responsible for our own lives, responsible for our work, and responsible for how we cultivate a work and work within our life that actually works for us. So finding the right organization or finding the right business to run, if that's what you want to do, if you're more entrepreneurial, and being able to say it's not anyone else's responsibility to bring me the joy at work. It's actually my responsibility to look after myself. That's not to say that other people won't have an influence, or that the fact that your laptop doesn't work doesn't make you want to throw it out the window every day isn't frustrating. So one thing I always want to make sure of, Vicki, is that we're not talking here about like toxic positivity. We're not talking about pretending that everything's okay. We're talking about the little things, the kind of micro moments that we can do every day, the things that we can focus on, where we can bring our attention to it to make work every day a little bit better than it was before, with the understanding that there are going to be challenges in life and in work that are difficult. We're not getting rid of the difficulty. What we're doing is we're finding a different mindset and a different approach to handling some of those challenges.
Lovely. Lovely. Wow. So many things that you shared there that like totally resonate. I love that, really taking responsibility for how you're showing up, how and what you want to create. Because you do have a choice, right? You can come in, you can be miserable, or you can come in and say, no, it's going to be a great day. Yeah, there's difficulties, no question. But it's how you approach the difficulty that actually matters. And so I love the work that you're doing. And you have this wonderful book now called Work Joy, a toolkit for better working life. And that was just shortlisted, right, in 2024 for a business book award.
Hot off the press, I actually won the highly commended award in the work and life category. So yeah, I
Oh,
have a little
fantastic.
award now. Thank you. Yeah.
Congratulations. Oh my goodness, that's amazing, Beth. Well done.
Thank
And,
you.
and and this becomes such an important, especially we were kind of talking before we started the podcast, but we were talking about, just what's happening in our world right now. And people are feeling sort of out of control and everybody's in this uncertainty and, worried about what's actually going to happen next. And so by creating this toolkit for a better working life, because you're right, we spend so much of our waking hours in that work mode. And for women in particular, because there's career workload and then there's the domestic workload.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So talk to us about your book. Talk to us about this toolkit that you have created.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little flash up of what it looks like here. Work Joy, a toolkit for a better working life. And it's really a step-by-step, or I like to call it a pick and mix guide, because you don't have to read, and I always think this, we are all busy people, right? You don't have to read it front to back. You can actually go, the problem I have at the moment is with my boss. Let me go to the boss's chapter and work out some of the things that I could do to manage that relationship better, so that it's not having such a big impact on me. Or actually what the challenge is at the moment is I have got to the point in my career where it's all career and I have no life. I have no space for anything other than work. So I need to go and look at the life chapter. So what I've done is I've broken it down into a number of different chapters. So the first part is all about kind of like the inner workings and our mindset and how we consider things and how life and work fit together. And I would love to ban the term work-life balance from any kind of thing, because I just think it's nonsense, this idea that work and life are always in complete balance. And we end up then feeling worse about ourselves because inevitably they're not in balance, because sometimes life takes over. We all know there are times, both wonderful and awful, when life takes over and work has to take a back seat. And equally, if we're going for a promotion or we're working on some personal development, or there's a big project, work takes over. Yeah. So this idea that we're always trying to find balance, let's get rid of it. I like the idea that we think about life and we actually do some proper, deep consideration for ourselves of how we want work to fit in to our life. And with work, as you say, there's the work that we get paid for. A lot of people also do things like volunteering, which we don't get paid for, but is still work. And we have, life work and life admin, and people have kids and like all of the domestic labor that we don't necessarily take into. It is actually all work, and we can bring some joy into all of that. But what we often don't do is sit there with ourselves and go, actually, what do I want this to be like in my life? And we get into, you go to college and then you go and get a job and then you progress, and then you're kind of on this escalator that just takes you. It's like one of those walkways in an airport, just kind of takes you on this thing, and you suddenly realize you've ended up somewhere that you had no intention of being, in a life where you're not sure if it's invented for you in the way that you want to do it. So taking back a little of that influence and control and understanding how you want it to be is a really good first step to then think about, okay, how do I make some of those things happen? How do I bring in, if I want to, actually, I do want to go and, spend some time doing some hobbies, or I actually really do want that promotion. So that is a focus area for me right now. how we can go and make that happen in a way that isn't just the hard slog and no joy within that.
Wow. Yes. And I love that. So I do want to talk a few minutes about this work-life balance, because you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100% on that, because when people think work-life balance, it's like that scale, right? And 50-50, which is not reality, right? It is not reality. And so it's recognizing what balance means for you, like really spending some time defining that,
Yeah.
and how you see balance. Is it like somebody I was talking to yesterday was sharing with me that he took 2.5 weeks off, and he goes, I've never done that. And I was like, what? Really? And he's like, no. And I said, and he was just sharing all the things he had learned on his travel. Matter of fact, he had visited the UK. And right. And he was saying, oh yes, like our ancestors came from Chester. But he was so excited and so animated. And he was like, I think I need to do more of that, but I need to retire to be able to do it. And I went, that's not actually true. And so we talked about that and started to unpack that a little bit, that why do you believe you have to retire to be able to do this? Like, what has happened with you, right? And so what you're talking about here is so important, that it's not a scale that's 50-50. It is figuring out what balance means to you. And then how, like, so Beth, what are maybe some micro examples of how to bring joy into the work life?
Yeah. So a really easy thing to do, and this is an experiment that anyone can go and make happen, is first of all to understand what brings you joy, because what brings me joy is probably different from what brings you joy, right? So one of the things I love to do is to stand on stage with thousands of people and talk to them. There are many, many people in this world who would rather very much not have to do that particular thing. I love it. I think it's brilliant, but some people would much rather sit and, work on a spreadsheet or look at the tech or look at the inner workings of the operation. That stuff blows my mind. I have no idea how people do those things. So you need to work out what brings you the joy. And the problem happens when you're in that kind of cycle of everything feels a bit meh, a bit rubbish. It's really hard to think, oh, well, this is what brings me joy, so I'll do more of it. So I recommend people spend one working week, whatever that working week looks like for you, and just track every day the things that bring you joy. Just notice what it is.
Nice.
So for some people, it might be what brings me joy is when I get to have meetings with people, when I get to talk to people. For some people, it's when they learn stuff. For other people, it's when they solve a problem. So just work out what it is. And then the other thing that you can think about is when you've worked out some of those things, you might also work out what are some of the things that don't bring you joy, and what are you doing about those things. So often we're just being very passive about stuff. We're kind of accepting what happens to us rather than going, I could actually solve that problem, or I could not put myself into that situation, or I could be more proactive. So here's an example. One of the things that often drives people mad when they work in the corporate world is meeting after meeting after meeting.
Oh my goodness.
And they're
Guilty.
sat there. They're sat there, right, going, I don't know why I'm in this meeting. I don't know what's going on. So here's one thing that you can do if that's one of your problems, Vicki, is just to go to the person who's running that meeting. I would say to you, Vicki, I'd love to be in this meeting with you. Can you tell me where you think my biggest contribution will be, so that I can make sure I contribute in that way? And they might go, actually, I don't think you need to be in this one. Great, you've got an hour back in your diary to go and do something else. Brilliant. Or they might say, actually, what I really want you to contribute on is this. And you're like, oh, I love talking about that, but you've never asked me that before, so let me go and do that. Or even just little things like, can we make sure there's an agenda so that I know what I'm doing? Because some people like to reflect on things before they go. So there are little things that you can do that sometimes are just asking a question or putting yourself in a slightly better position for a meeting, for example. Another example would be one of my coaching clients was like, I am so grumpy when I go to this type of meeting. Like I just turn up, or I just don't know what's going on, etc. And we did the tracking. And one of the things we look at in tracking is like, what's the timing of things when you get really grumpy? And what they worked out was like, it was early on in the afternoon. So it's like 2:00 every day, whatever they were doing, whether it was in a meeting or trying to do a piece of work, they were grumpy. And then we worked it back. And we were like, okay, you have not had a lunch break, been outside, looked at the world, or done anything other than sit at your desk for 6 hours. Try taking even just a 15-minute lunch break. Suddenly no longer grumpy. So sometimes it's actually something that we don't expect it to be. It's looking after ourselves, or we haven't done the things that we know we're supposed to do. Or we are sometimes also, Vicki, just in a job where we're like, actually, I've outgrown this job. This job is no longer the thing that I am passionate about. I have done it for a number of years, or the people have changed and that's not where I want to go, or the organization culture isn't where it used to be. And we've got ourselves somehow stuck in that situation, believing, like the person you were saying, until I retire, I can't change this. Well, you can. You could go and look for a different job, or I like call it go on a work safari. Go and find out other things that you could be doing. Ask for different projects, ask for more responsibility. Again, it's that take away the passiveness from it and start to take some ownership, start to ask for questions, ask for what you want. And if they can't give you what you want, then you know that you might need to go and look somewhere else. But most of the time, I think, if in my previous experience and in the experience of the people I spend a lot of time with coaching, if they ask their boss for something, their boss usually tries and makes it happen for them.
Yes, exactly. And the bosses aren't mind readers, right? No. So you have to talk about it. And that's so interesting. Like, I love the examples you shared there. Those are brilliant. And those are micro steps to get you to the place you want to be. So if it's not working, it gets you where you want to get to. But that's so brilliant, because if you're not asking, you're not getting, right?
Absolutely.
Love that.
They're not going to give it to you by accident. It's going to happen because you have made something happen, cultivated it, let the right person know what you're interested in, and they will then be able to help you with that. And if they can't help you with that, then you go and help yourself somewhere else.
Exactly.
But at least you know, and at least you've tried to solve the problem where you are before you go and step into exactly the same situation in another organization. You've learned the skill.
Yes, because wherever you go, there you are, right? And so it is making sure that you're taking responsibility and you're doing, because it so many times I have this conversation with clients where I'm like, why do you think it's going to be different when you go to a different organization? Right? And I mean, yes, there will be, if you have a highly toxic boss, or maybe the culture has changed, like you mentioned, and it's no longer in alignment with your value system, then of course that makes total sense. But a lot of times it's because we have this fear of speaking up and saying, you know what, this is not working for me anymore. I want to show up differently. I want to have a different area of responsibility, or I want more responsibility, right? Or maybe I have too much. Maybe it's that where I'm choking because we've laid people off and now I'm just on the verge of burnout. But if you're not having the conversations, it's not going to change, right? Yeah.
And if you don't initiate something or do something, it will just get worse.
Yeah.
It will not get better on its own. And I find a lot of people are waiting for things to get better, or even worse, waiting for things to be like they were 5 years ago, and nothing ever rolls backwards. It only ever rolls forward. So we need to be able to say, actually, this is no longer for me. Or what some people do, and this is where life fits into it as well, is they say, I know this isn't the place I want to be long term, but at the moment it's near my kids' school. So I just need to accept the fact that this is where I'm going to be until this moment in time. But then what we can't do is sit and moan about that, because that just gets everybody into a bad space. And then you're becoming the person that everyone else is like, oh, they're really miserable.
I don't want to be around Vicki right now.
And it's just not a great spiral. So when you accept certain things for a reason, a genuine reason that works for you, great. But know that you've accepted them and be okay with the fact that you've accepted some of those limitations.
Yes, exactly. So something you said there, Beth, I think is a really important thing for us to highlight. And that's about living in the past, right? If you're living in the past, you can't be in the future, right? And so many of us, we do that, right? Because we think back to the good old days, or I wish, or when that boss was here, right? Mm-hmm. And this really plays in beautifully to what you're talking about with respect to that work joy, right? Finding those moments that really rev you up, whatever that is. Like for me, you mentioned, having a meeting with somebody. Well, I'm a connector, and my energy goes way up when I have an opportunity to connect with others. And just that curiosity of what are they dealing with? How are they managing? What are the complexities that are, in front of them at that moment, that maybe by our conversation, we can help them navigate it more easily.
Yeah. And I think that idea that there are so many different things, but that's the wonder of it, is that I could probably pick 50 things that will bring me joy. And most of them I'm in control of. I can go and do it. Little things like you start the day with a really nice coffee that you really love can be great. Start the day like you saying hello to some people as you walk in the office. Start the day in that great way. And if you end up doing a job where none of the things bring you joy, you've got to try and get yourself to at least a neutral position to try and then, in a sensible way, move on. But that looking backwards thing is always filled with what we call it in the UK, rose-tinted spectacles. I don't know if that translates well. Is we look back on things and only pick out the good moments because they're the things that we often recall and remember, and we kind of have this nostalgia for what it was like before. But there were everyone who says that to me also spent all of that time moaning about what wasn't right
Exactly.
back then as well. But what it was is maybe it's the comfort of, it's how I knew it to be versus how it is. And I do think you said at the beginning, the world is changing at such pace. Organizations are changing at pace, AI, all this stuff that's coming in and kind of feels quite threatening. We have an option. We can feel threatened by it and retreat, or we can go, what is this opportunity going to give me in terms of different jobs and things that we've never even considered before? And that, I think, is more of the attitude that will help you in the future world of work, is to go, how do I get on board with this? How do I understand what it does? How do I become an expert in something that is going to happen versus hoping that what I was good at 5 years ago still applies now?
Yeah. That's really powerful. And so that mindset, because that's what you're talking about, right? It's like moving from woe is me to, wow, this is the possibilities, right? And so helping people start to reframe their thinking into more of a possibility. And that's not being Pollyanna. That's not that, toxic positivity that you mentioned earlier. That's about a choice that you have as an individual, right?
Definitely.
And yes, please go.
Some of the things that I talk about in there, it's in the end of every chapter of the book, is 3 ways of approaching this. So we can get more work joy passively. We can. It's possible. If we have an amazing boss, an amazing team, and an amazing job, we can get some work joy kind of via osmosis, via other people. But actually, I like to think about, I call them the 3 E's, which is different ways of considering how to make this happen. So from mindset into action, which is like engage your brain with the idea of things that you could do. And you called it reframing some of that work gloom is information telling you stuff you don't like or you don't enjoy. So what can you do about it? Or how you can cultivate the work joy. So make sure you're putting some engagement on it and not just waiting for stuff done. The waiting is never going to work. I also talk about then applying your energy and where are you investing your energy, because it takes just as much energy, in fact, probably more, to spend your life doing woe is me and moaning about stuff as it does to go, what could I do about that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But we're all so guilty because, and listen, audience, we both, Beth and I both recognize it's not easy. There are so many environmental influences, societal influences that do set the stage for negativity, right? You just turn on the news and it's automatic negative. And so again, it becomes a choice, right? In how we process that information. So I'll share a quick example, and I may have, audience, forgive me, I may have said this before, but I had a good friend of mine. I remember it was like our first snow in Toronto, right? This is a few years ago. And she called and she was like, oh my gosh, can you believe we already have snow? It's only November. And she was like complaining, right? And I was like, I know, isn't it beautiful? Like the earth is just like coated with this beautiful white blanket and everything looks so crisp and clean. And she was like, oh God, you kill me. You're so positive. And I said, I know, it's a choice, right? And that's all I said to her. And then I started noticing that she started noticing what she was saying, right? And so it's really easy to get caught up. And we all do it. We all do it.
Everyone.
Right? But it's like, to your point, like how do we consciously, intentionally look for those moments of joy, right? And sometimes you have to do it outwardly. Like how about the homeless person on the street that you pass? Giving a smile, right? Or saying hello to someone that you pass on the street. Little things that you might be the only person that speaks to that person today.
Yeah. And I think it's those little moments that, whether we do them for ourselves and encourage ourselves, but also to other people. So you talk about there, like your friend, I would definitely be on but look how beautiful it looks. And we can go and play in the snow and it will be amazing. Like snow day is fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Other people will be like, oh, but I can't drive anywhere. Like, great, you can't drive anywhere. What can we do today? There's these little things of joy is catching. So the minute somebody brings some positivity into it, it's catching. But so is the gloom, the work gloom side of things, where we bring the negativity. That is just as catching. And catch yourself and who you're spending time with. And if I call them mood hoovers, if you're spending time with a load of mood hoovers who spend their whole time in a negative mindset, it is considerably more likely that you will be in a negative mindset too.
Yeah.
So you might need to start thinking about, actually, I need to spend some time with people who aren't bringing it down, but bringing it up. You might need to do some trimming of your social media feed so that you're seeing more positive or more aligned content to your values. You might need to think about how much time and space you give to watching the news and getting stuck in the things you cannot control versus things that you can have some control or some influence over. And that's where I recommend as well doing some experimentation. So, if spending time with you is joyful, Vicki, I'm going to do more spending time with you. But if spending time with you was really, I'm not sure, values not aligned, really moany, I might be like, do you know what? I'm going to be polite and friendly, but I'm not going to spend all my time with that person. But that's where we need to experiment with stuff, because the first thing we do doesn't always work. So sometimes we might go, I think it's this, and you think you've solved the problem. You're like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. We've got to try some stuff out and I call them like little micro experiments. Go and try something. See if having a conversation with Vicki makes a difference to your day. And if it does, do it more often. Yeah. Try some things out and be prepared to step out of your normal routines and patterns. As humans, we love routine and we love like this whole, I always do this and I always do that and I always do that. But the minute you change some of that up, for some people, that's all you need to do. You just need to swap something over or change a little attitude towards something. Yeah. And that, if you can do the mindset stuff, the rest of the stuff will follow. If you can think, I want to be more joyful, I want to find those opportunities to do it inside and outside of work. Because the other thing is, some people change nothing about their work. They just go and do something fun outside of work, and suddenly everything in work doesn't seem quite so bad.
Exactly.
So everything swaps between. They're not two separate things. You don't turn into a different person the minute you log on to work or go through the office door. It's actually about cultivating a life where you have more joy, whether that's in work or outside of work.
Yeah, love that. And it's the inward work for yourself, right? Like that is such an important part. And so when you were talking about like sort of tracking, take a week and track, what are the moments of joy? What are the things you don't like? So it helps you. But I think there's also the importance of capturing that mental narrative that's happening, right? So is it negative self-talk or positive self-talk? Like, even simple things like looking in the mirror in the morning and going, oh my God, I have bags under my eyes. Or, wow, you know what? My complexion looks really good today.
Yeah,
like it's
right. Good.
Those are those micro moments that you're talking about. And it's what you're feeding internally that also shows up externally. Right. And people do tend to gravitate to positive people. Right.
They do. Yeah. I mean, you think about it. If you are sat in an interview, right? If you're the person interviewing for a new role and it's like a promotion for somebody, and they come to you and all they do is moan about everything, or they look really negatively about everything, versus the person who's like, yeah, we can make that happen, I'm going to do this, you're going to hire the person that is more positive.
Yes, always.
And that's not to say that you can't be positive and still highlight risk and still be okay with the fact that not everything is perfect. It's not about all or nothing. It's like, actually, a little bit more positivity will make a difference to you. And what you're talking about there, there's a whole chapter in the book on stories, and specifically the stories we tell ourselves. You're talking about earlier, I connect this together of people looking backwards. So many people I work with have what I call out of date stories. So they're telling themselves they're still a junior version of themselves when they're actually quite senior. They're telling themselves they don't have confidence when all of the activity they do shows their confidence. But they're telling themselves they're diminishing their power and diminishing their impact and their influence. And it's like, you need a story that's caught up with where you are in your life and your career that will help you for the next phase of whatever that looks like.
Brilliant. I love that. So and I would say this is a huge takeaway for our audience today. You get to create the map of where you want to be. And it's up to you then to walk that path or drive that path, however you want to look at it, because it's your life. And if it's not working the way it is, change it.
It's your life. And like, here we go. There is loads of other stuff that will influence that. There's global stuff. There's stuff in your organization. There's stuff in your life, stuff in your background. There's stuff to do with privilege. There's stuff, a whole load of stuff that will influence that. But at the end of the day, no one else is going to control. If you don't control it, someone else will.
Yeah.
So
100%.
take the reins and do something. And I will tell you this, and after lots and lots of years of working with people on doing this particular thing, one step forward in any direction feels way better than standing still.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter if you move one step forward, you're like, that's not the right direction, you go back again. You have learned something there. And the next time you make a move, you will move in the right direction. So people often get stuck not wanting to make a decision in case it's wrong. Just think about for a moment, if you're experimenting, there's no such thing as a wrong decision. You just try something out. And if it works, you keep moving. And if it doesn't, you move in a different direction.
I love
We do
that.
not need perfection. We want progress. So stop looking for perfection. Look for, how do I progress where I am and move forwards.
That's a great way for us to wrap up today. Like, that is so important to recognize that one step makes the world of difference, right? And it's up to you to take that step. So you do have a choice. That's what I've heard from our conversation today. Like, really taking responsibility and checking those internal messages that you're sharing with yourself. Be highly intentional with finding those micro moments of joy, whether it's at work or in life, like really being intentional about that. And if you don't like what's happening, change it. It's okay. Yes. Love it, Beth. Oh, wow. So any last comments that you would like to share with our audience today before we leave?
I'd just like to always think that you have more power than you think you do to make big changes in your life, but it's always the small, tiny steps that make that change happen. So make those choices, take some decisions, and look after your own life, because it is yours. And there are so many things you can do. Just go and have some joy somewhere and see the impact that it can have.
Awesome. And if you don't mind, Beth, maybe show the book one more time. So for those of you that are listening, and you can see this visually, it's called Work Joy. And you can find that where, Beth? Where can people find the book?
Yeah. So obviously you can find it on Amazon and online bookstores. It's currently available in English and in Polish. So there's a couple of language options for you as well. Hopefully more to come. But I would be looking online at your favorite online bookstores, and you should be able to get it through there.
Awesome. And where can they find you? Like, if people want to connect, or if they have questions about Work Joy, where do they locate you?
Would love to have questions. Please do get in contact. Two places, probably the easiest. The first one is I'm always hanging around on LinkedIn. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't just follow, connect, because then you can send me messages. So love that. And also my website is bethstallwood.com. Would love to see you around there as well. And yeah, just message me. I'm always happy to answer any questions. If you've got a particular challenge, just send me a message and I will come back to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Beth. This has been just a brilliant conversation. I think some really excellent examples of, what our audience can walk away with today and start to implement. And that's the whole point, right? If you take one thing from the conversation today and that has an impact on your life, then we've done our job. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, please do give us a review, share it. If you know somebody who maybe is struggling and they need to find more joy in their life, share this episode with them so that they can have an impact as well. And just quickly, sorry, Beth, did you want to say something?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and do share, and would love to hear from you all.
Awesome. Well, so you know now where to connect with Beth. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can go to her website. If you have any questions after our conversation today, please do that. And what I'll share with you, if you go on the WIL Empowered website, that's WIL empowered.com, you can find 2 video series that we offer for free. And one of those is about how to overcome fear. And the second one is about building great habits. So go on our website, check those out. Those are free for you to have, but it'll give you some really good insight as to, how to take some of those steps and overcome fear. So thank you everyone for being here. Again, we know you have a choice as to what podcasts you listen to, and we're grateful to have, listeners from 50 plus countries now. And so we're grateful for that, and, continue to let us know how we're doing, and we'll see you at the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Take care, everyone, and have a brilliant day. Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.